I'm Mike Davis. I'm running for the Florida House District 17. I am the owner of A.D. Davis Construction Company. That's a business that my grandfather started in 1954. We have 20 full-time employees. Most of them have been with us over 10 years. So I'm a small business owner. I'm understanding exactly what small business is going through and trying to survive and to grow and to create jobs. I've been in St. Augustine since I was 5 years old. Went through the Catholic school systems here, graduated from St. Joseph's Academy in '84. Went to Florida Southern College, graduated with a degree in communications in 1988, and then went back to work in the family business and went to school part-time at the University of North Florida to get a second degree in construction technologies. I've been with that company since '88. I've owned it for the last 10 years. Very proud of the work that we have done within the community and what we've been able to give back thanks to our success. Been married to my wife Darcy for almost 23 years, and we have 4 children. Our 2 oldest will be in college next year, 1 in high school and 1 in middle school. Darcy's a first grade teacher at Hartley Elementary School. She was the teacher of the year for Hartley Elementary School last year, so I'm very proud of all of her work in the classroom. And that's a little bit about me.
Cool, thank you.
Well, good morning, welcome. Let's start with a question on school funding for buildings. You know, it's a big issue here. The school district's very upset with the legislature for providing funding for charter schools, for which there's not a big demand here, and not providing construction funds for public schools, for which there's a large demand. If you're elected, how would you address that issue?
Well, I think one of the things we've got to look at is the way that the revenue models were built before this Great Recession are different than how people are spending their money today and how they're collecting revenue. And I think we've got to look at that as a state legislature. You know, how are you going to collect revenue? Where are those revenue streams from? Some of the ones that used to be solid for school construction, the tax on landlines. Most people don't have a landline today. If you're under 30 years old, you're using your cell phone. And so, you know, that's not the funding source and stream that it used to be. The other way to really fix the problem is you got to get the economy going again in the whole state. I mean, declining revenues are going to continue to force those tough decisions. We're in a growing, thriving part of the state where we still have people moving in to our area, especially in the Northwest, because those parents want their kids to go to our school system. And so we have a bigger problem with construction funds than some of the other areas in the state where you've got, you know, declining kids or people that just don't have declining enrollment with children. So I think we kind of face a more unique sense. I think our school board has done a phenomenal job. They've done a great job for years and years in planning schools and locating schools and finding the funding for those. But the state's going to have to look at what those revenue streams are. We're going to have to readdress that. We're in a dynamic, moving economy, and people do not spend money the way they used to.
I get that. What the school board's arguing, there is money for school construction. They're just using it for charter schools. They say, why don't we use them for public schools with this in demand?
Well, I think we talked about this in the forum. Because St. Johns County is so good, you don't have as much a demand for charter schools here. When you go to other parts of the state, and that's been one of the things that has been very interesting for me is reading news articles every day from around the state first thing in the morning and what those issues are. And there's some areas of the state that they've struggled with trying to turn around failing schools, haven't been able to do that. And that charter school is their opportunity to possibly to succeed at that. My problem with the charter schools, if you read some of them, they will form in 2011. They'll get approved. They'll be in a set building. It's a certain administration. It's a certain school population. The next year they form another charter school in the same building, same school population, same administration under a different name and get startup funds a second year in a row. I'm opposed to that. I think that's wrong. And the other thing is those schools have got to be able to stand on their own. You know, my kids go to private school, and I've talked to Joe Joyner about the cost because I sit on the school board for St. Joseph Academy. It's said that the costs are almost identical for sending a kid through school, whether they're in private or whether they're in public. It's how you fund the debt structure for the buildings as to where your costs are. So we've had some interesting conversations on that over the years. To say that I would say all the funding needs to go to the public schools. I think there's certain parts of the state where charter schools are very important for the chance for those kids to succeed. You know, you don't see it here in St. Johns County because we've got a great school system. If we had a great school system all throughout the state, we wouldn't be having this discussion about funding for charter schools.
My question didn't say that all the money should go to public schools. Their argument is that some should. They're saying right now none is going to. None of that money is going to schools, to public schools for construction, and they need a school a year, and is what the school district is forecasting.
Well,
A new school year.
and I think that that's one of the. I've said again that lots of times on the campaign trail, St. Johns County is the best school district. Now, a lot of times, what happens when you're the best at anything is when they write rules to fix what's wrong with the bottom, you pay for that.
Mhm.
You have additional rules and regulations that you've got to follow, or you get penalized for that. I think that's one of the key things is having somebody that understands that in the legislature, willing to work and fight for our school district and say, hey, for us to continue to be the best school district, we've got to continue doing things the way we used to. And if one of those is funding, then we need to get funding for the schools.
Okay, I asked this question before, so I'll get off education very quickly. But Governor Jeb Bush has said that pay for performance won't work if there isn't any money. If there isn't any money, you said that, as did your opponents. Eventually, if there isn't any money, is Jeb Bush correct that this will fail?
If there's no money and you've got a program that's based on money, then yeah, it'll fail. That's just a simple economics. You can look at that and say, I think that, again, you're back to getting the economy to grow to be able to fund these things. Now, I'm somebody that firmly believes that you don't treat everybody all the same. I've got employees that are all different. And every one of them is judged and based for pay performance on how they perform, not based on a baseline for everyone else. I think that if you're doing a good job and you're getting better results than your peers, then you should be paid more money for that. And I understand that the teachers have an issue with that and how that's divided up. I've had long conversations with my wife about that and other teachers. Some of it, how do you equitably do that, and what's the system that you're going to, how are you going to pay them? If you've got 4 spots open in your classroom because of the class size amendment, and the last 4 kids that come in are all developmentally disabled, and you're now being judged on pay for performance on that, that's not fair if you've got a disproportionate population in your classroom versus the teacher next door to you. So there's issues there. Back to your funding, I think you're going to have to find ways, again, back to where you're going to get the money from, how much is it going to cost, and how are you going to get that into the school systems. And right now, until we see the economy move and we see revenues growing at the state, the only way you'll get the money is if you begin to fight between the two biggies in the state budget, and that's healthcare and education.
In the forum, you said a very interesting thing, and I wish the others had said it. You said, asked the question about how the school board was, not happy with what the legislature was doing, and your response was to the effect that, hey, when you're one-party system, you're going to disagree. It's just within the family. But that said, from the questions that I raised, it's very clear the county government is very upset with the state legislature. School board's very upset because they think that basically that they're kicking the can down the road, and they're the one that has to pick up the can that the legislature's kicked down the road. If you're elected, what are you going to do to help repair some of those relations? I'm surprised at the intensity of the anger by Republicans toward the Republican legislature here in St. John's, and I assume that you've felt the sting of that in the campaign trail.
Oh yeah, we've had a lot of discussions, and I get along very well with school board members. I get along very well with the county commissioners, and some I've got a very good personal relationship with them. And I think some of that is, I've always said in a relationship, you want to respect one another. You're going to disagree. It's knowing that the other person is working as hard as they can, when they can, to help you out, and when they can't, they're going to tell you, hey, I can't help you in this situation, and not carrying a grudge with that. If you look at the things that I've been involved in, whether it's work or community, I do a very, very good job of that. Being able to communicate, hey, this is where we're going, or this is how we can get there. I'm also doing a very good job of listening. I mean, everything that I do is people come to me and say, I want this built. Well, how do you want this built? How are we going to accomplish this? And will you work on this, this nonprofit board and those things? So you have to listen. I think the legislature's been in a very tough spot because of declining revenues. One of the things that I am disappointed in is I'm a limited government person. But limited government doesn't mean you take the responsibility to provide that service from the state level, cut the budget there, and then pass it down to the counties and say, you're now responsible for this and we're not giving you any additional revenue to pay for it. I don't agree with that at all. And I think that's an unfunded mandate, and we've got a lot of those that are coming down, and we got to change that. If we're going to have core principles as Republicans and as conservatives, you got to stick to those. And so you've got to find ways to work within within the structure to get that done. It can be, I think that's going to be very difficult for at least another year or two. I mean, if the economy begins to pick up, which we're seeing signs that it is, revenues are going to lag another year or 2 years. So next year's budget isn't going to be any better than this year's budget, and there's going to be a lot of issues that are going to have to be worked through with that. But I think having that ability to pick up the phone, call somebody in the county commission that you know personally, that, hey, this is what we're faced with, this is what we can do, is there anything else I can do to help you get that done? You know, that to me is one of the biggest pluses I think I bring to this. You know, I'm willing to, I look at serving this district as representing the people. If somebody calls and says, we need help with an issue or we have a problem, it's just my job to do the best that I can to try to solve that. If I can't, I've got to tell them why we can and what needs to be done to correct it.
Okay. Kim Kendall is running as a social conservative. She's made it very clear that that's a very high priority for her. I asked a question about teaching of evolution in science classes, and her direct quote was, "We must allow students in science classes to question whether evolution is a basis for the origin of life." That's called academic freedom. The three of you agreed with her that should be taught, and that the biblical creation of life should be taught in science class. My question to you is, how big a priority is this going to be? Are you going to be, like Senator Wise, a leader in these issues? Or if Mrs. Kendall were elected, I suspect she would be a leader in these issues. How high in the priority scale are these? Is this something that you're going to be beating the drum on?
It's a priority. I'll tell you, my first priority is getting the economy going again.
Mm-hmm.
That jobs and job creation and helping small businesses is the biggest priority for a lot of the reasons we've already talked about, because it solves so many other problems that we have. On this issue, I answered that night, and I still believe this. I think that the important part of teaching kids is one of the things we don't talk about, is what those kids come back and talk to their parents about at night. You know, my kids have gone to the public school, K through 5th, and then we go to the Catholic school from middle school through high school. We talk to them every day about what they're learning in school. And there are issues that we as parents agree with and disagree with in both school systems. I think it's good that kids are exposed to a wide variety of things. I personally believe that you know, creationism should be taught, that they should be, you know, this is, you know, and this is one of the theories. It's my personal theory on how life came to be, and we can argue about 7 days versus the length of time and all of those things, and it'd be a great conversation. It'll take longer than the hour that we have here. Versus evolution and Darwin's theory. So, but to me, the important thing is that when the kids come home, that the parents discuss with them what their personal beliefs are and why we as a family unit believe in creationism or we believe in evolution. And I think that's one of the things that we're missing in the school discussion.
How old is your oldest child?
She is 20.
20? How old is your second?
He is 18.
And he talks to you about those things?
Yes, we did.
Good.
We talk about...
My kids stopped talking to me when he was 14. He started to talk to me again when he was 19. But there was that 5-year gap.
We've had some very good discussion with it. My poor kids, I'm a history minor.
Mm-hmm.
And so anytime they bring anything home from history class, there's a lot of revisionist history that's in the textbooks these days, even in the Catholic school system. Mm-hmm. And where they just kind of cringe, hey Dad, I got a history question. They know they're getting ready to get a 20-minute lecture about that history subject. So, you know, they tend to worry more about that part of me than the other aspect. But, you know, for us, you know, one of the important things of sending our kids to the Catholic school system is we want that religious component in their upbringing. We feel like it's been a huge plus for developing the whole person. Am I going to go out there and tell everybody else to raise their kids that way? No, I'm not. I mean, I believe that you have your choice and that you as a parent have to pick that. And
is that, sorry, it's just the word is science class, and that's not science. I just understand why that got in there. It's religion, and that should be in a religion class, I would think, or at home. Why infect science with superstition and religion, mythology?
Well, and this is where you and I would...
Well, even if I believe something, it doesn't make it so. So, I mean, science is something that shows what is so.
Let me just phrase it differently. As science is based on empirical evidence, religion is based on faith. And by definition, they're different. Mm-hmm. And so basically the question that I think Peter's asking is, you're introducing a faith component into something that's based on empirical evidence.
Okay. This is a great discussion. There's a lot of empirical evidence that we took for fact 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We taught it in science class, and it's wrong. And you can go through, I mean, I'm a big workout, stay in shape type person. Go look at the diets we've been told to be on for the last 15 years that there were empirical evidence that were scientifically proven. If you did this, this, and this, this is the best thing for your body. And then 5 years later, another study comes out and says, oh, no, 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 we shouldn't do that. And I'll throw coffee drinking in there as one kind of odd one. You know, coffee drinking goes from it's great for your heart to it'll kill you to it's great for your heart. Just wait for the study you want to justify whether you want to drink it or not drink it. So
Don't you attack me. You're doing all right until then. Boom.
And I understand, and probably, you know, one of the things is if you can, I haven't looked at the school curriculum. Are we teaching religion classes in schools, in public schools?
I believe it's an elective in higher levels, but I don't know.
I mean, it's not, but science is taught every day, and we teach the science, you know, the science of evolution. And you know, again, there are people that will argue over that, you know, with you. I go back to my comments in the forum about Ben Carson, who's the pediatric neurosurgeon, okay, who's a man of faith, who is one of the most renowned neurosurgeons in the world, has separated co-joined twins and Siamese twins and all, and he will tell you that the brain is the most amazing thing he has ever seen, and that there's no way that we came from that it just evolved on its own, that there had to have been some divine intervention. And this is a man that operates on the brain every single day and had this speech in front of a group of scientists. And the scientists came up to him afterwards and said, we thank you for having this speech. We're afraid to bring this up in our own community because everybody is so set on one belief.
Let me move on to another thing. You mentioned unfunded mandates. One of the issues that two issues that the county commission members are upset about in the county government, both involve the Growth Management Act. One is that they're saying basically the state is, because of this, is strongly encouraging that the locals do not impose impact fees for, not impact fees, concurrency for highway construction. And the county's argument is these roads are going to have to be built. If they're not done by the people doing the development, then the taxpayers are going to have to build those roads. How do you stand on that issue? I know that you have questions about concurrency, but the questions you were raising about concurrency were sort of getting in the weeds. This is a bigger question about if they build this, 5 PUDs on one stretch of road, that road's going to have to be bigger. The PUDs or the DRI are not going to have to pay for that. Somebody's going to have to pay for it. The county sees that as kicking the can down into their lap.
There's some part of that they're probably right on. I mean, as far as where's the funding going to be for this and how are we going to improve it? We go in Florida when times are really good. We ask developers to pay for everything. We ask them to pay for things that are absolutely ridiculous, and if they want to get their development done, they have to pay for it. Times are bad, and we absolutely need the growth economically, and then we tell them, okay, we're not going to require you to do this. Well, it's going to have to be done. Somebody's going to have to do it down the road. But the other issue is, if those developments go and you're going to see increased revenue, okay, from those homes. You're going to see increased ad valorem tax. You're going to see increased sales tax. You're going to see, they will create additional revenue. I'm not running for a county commissioner. Telling them how to spend their budget is not one of the things that I've done. But I mean, I've gone and looked at impact fees on commercial projects.
I'm not. That wasn't a question about impact fees. Their argument is that had been a state function. They're asking the state is saying, don't require these guys to do concurrency. They're saying, whoa, we still have to build the roads. Now instead of them doing it, you through legislation at the state level, and now telling us we have to do it, in essence raise our taxes or cut other services to provide the funding for it.
Well, I guess I break it down to this argument. Is the growth important for your area so that you can economically begin to move again? Or would you rather stall growth for another 5 or 10 years because you're going to require everybody to pay for roads and sewer systems and things that they, I've had developers that I've watched them pay for a lot of things that sometimes the county government ought to be paying for. And in some cases in our county, the developer said, well, we'll put sewer lines in and water lines in and we'll get impact fee credits back to pay for that rather than the county paying for it. And the county agreed to those deals, and they're tough deals on the developers now and on the county because the county can't change fee structure without impacting how they get paid back for what they did on infrastructure. The larger developments, should they be paying for some of the roads? You have to look at how much of an impact it's going to have on that road. Where are those people coming from? The smaller developments, the ones that I deal with all the time, I think they're unduly burdened by these rules and regulations. And, you know, requiring somebody to put in a 150-foot turn lane for a business that 30 cars are going to turn into a day is not a good deal. When you've got growth in a, you know, a building or a church where you're getting on Sunday, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people showing up, and you've got problems getting them in and out of church after, you know, that's an issue. That's something that we go back to public safety, and how do you deal with that? And it's not just that; it's if you built a mall or a regional area. So, you know, I personally would rather see the growth, and I'd rather see the growth, and you know, I think again we get the economy moving, we'll have money to come back and do those roads and those segments, and the state's going to have to step in and be a part of that. But we got to get everybody healthy again. We got to get them working again. And I would rather err on that side than err on the side of we're not going to let people do developments. And the bigger developments right now aren't going to be going anywhere until you start getting rid of some of the other developments that we've already approved.
Okay. One last question on growth management. One of the changes in growth management has been is that the state no longer funds the people who make sure that you have done the environmental mitigation. So if it's wetlands, the people used to check to see, hey, you're doing this work, and follow up to make sure it's being done. They have defunded that, so there's no one left to do it. So the counties have to pick up that cost, or it doesn't get done. That is what the county sees as kicking a can down into their lap, and that they're forced to pay for it. And they're not happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on that?
Again, that's we're saying we want limited government, but we're putting the responsibility on the county to monitor it. And so we're asking the county to pay the funds. I'm against doing those type of things. If you're going to do it, you got to find some.
But this is done by the state legislature.
I understand. I'm against it. I mean, that's what I'm saying. If we're going to be a limited government, and we're going to limit that government, you can't limit that government and then push the responsibility down to somebody else and say, we want you to pay for it. Now, without funding. Now, if you've come up with the county and said, look, if you want to fund it, this is how you're going to have to fund it. At the same time, there are things that we have to do in our industry that we go get state approval for. And their rules are here. And then we got to go get county approval, and their standards are here. Well, why are we going to the state if the county standards are higher? Let's just go to the county. Let's accept the fact. Let's get an agreement between the state and the county. If the county is going to hold us to a higher development standard than the state is, why do we need to go spend 3 months at the state getting their approval as well? You know, and if we're paying a fee to the state, let's pay that fee to the county. Let's let the county then turn around and do what they've got to do to monitor. My biggest thing too is I've watched some of these water management and wetlands issues. I've watched officers for the St. Johns River Water Management walk out, look at a piece of property. We've got it staked by a surveyor and by an expert that says this is where the wetland is. Walk out there and say, no, the wetland's not there. The wetland is 40 feet west of that or east, or we're going to take another 40 feet of this owner's property. That owner has no recourse. They've just lost the use of their property. Their project has to get smaller, their buildings have to change, their parking lot has to change, because somebody who's not elected, and we don't have any control over, just impacted them. And we're going to call the Water Management District. So until these changes have gone through the Water Management District, for us, and the development and growth, it was a very difficult place to work. Without a recourse, without a hearing, without, you go to your owner and say, well, I'm sorry, you just lost 40 feet by 400 feet of your property. Well, why? Well, because that person said that they disagree with where the wetlands line is and we now have to change it. Or we have to mitigate larger areas. I'd much rather see that at a local level where you can actually get local people involved in solving that issue.
You speak of limited government. Can you give some examples of how you think it should be further limited? Or areas that it's in now that it shouldn't be in? And maybe even a better question is, and then how do you accomplish that?
Well, I think some of it is, this country, everybody gets elected, they want to go over there and they want to pass a law that says, look what I passed. But we're all for limited government, okay? And every legislator is going to get 6 bills in their year to run. And they all want to go back and say, look, I helped the district, I passed this rule and this law. Sometimes some of the things that we're trying to pass don't make life any easier. And you know, this will kind of, I had a friend the other day that was kayaking on the Intercoastal and pulled up at the marina. Okay, there's a boat for the Coast Guard there. There's a boat for Customs there. There's a boat for the Sheriff's Department there, and I think the Police Department. All at the city marina basin to check and see if he's wearing his life vest on his kayak. That's not limited government. There are. I think there's times.
Did they take him away in handcuffs?
No, I don't think they did. But yeah, there are certain. Ron, I think you got to look at almost every agency and every department, and I think every one of them, when they come into being, had a good intention and purpose behind it. But then they grow to the point, well, how do we continue to make ourselves important to people? Well, we have to continue to write rules that we've got to enforce as an agency, and that's where I think we've got to take a hard look at how those agencies are running. You know, what programs are involved in. You know, you can talk to farmers about what they run into on a farm with rules and regulations. I can go through it in my industry. I can go into all the other industries. And, you know, there are things that we're required to do that do nothing but cost us money. And in good times, we can pass that along to our customers. In bad times, it comes out of your bottom line.
I'll ask a question about jobless. I was surprised by the answer I got from you folks up there. The jobless state's unemployment rate would have dropped 0.3% if all the people who had been looking for jobs continued to look for jobs. It's dropped almost 2 points because the disaffected or this discouraged worker has dropped out. And indeed, there was another study yesterday that the Tampa Bay Times reported that said basically the same thing. And the question I asked was, I thought was a softball. I thought that would everyone would answer it, and no one answered it the way I assumed that they would, because the question was structured towards St. Johns County. What could the legislature do to help growth in St. Johns County? And so I'll ask you, there seems to me to be two things that would be very helpful to growth in St. Johns County, and that is leveraging Port of Jacksonville and leveraging the health community. We have excellent hospitals in as we do here, but especially the research hospitals, the big hospitals, and Mayo, Baptist, St. Vincent, and the other hospitals up there. What role do you see the legislature using to leverage that for helping create jobs here in this county?
This has been, I got this question a couple of times on the campaign trail, and you know, as a small business owner, there's never been a law passed that made me hire anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Not one. Now, there have been laws that have been passed that created an environment where business grew and we were able to hire people because of that. But thinking that the legislature can have a direct effect on small business, you know, the only thing they can do is create an environment in which we can make more money. Our clients that we all work for want to go build, or they want to expand their businesses, and you know, and they've got a good environment. But the biggest thing right now is nobody has any confidence or faith nationally that the economy is going to turn around. And you can go back and look at the economy. There was an economist that wrote an article about 6 months ago. The economy was actually coming out of the recession until health care was passed nationally. It has flatlined since then. There's been no growth. Everybody is just kind of bumping along the road and waiting to see what that's going to cost. So, you know, can you improve the port? Yeah. Can you open up the port? Do we need to do that as a legislature? Should we be behind that? Yes, we should. Okay. The hospital issue, you can make it a great environment for hospitals, but until they figure out what they're going to get paid under this new health care plan, they're not going to run out and hire a bunch of people and take that in. Because the way the plan's written now is you've got 3 years of reimbursements from the government, and then in the fourth year we begin to cut the Medicaid reimbursement by 10%. So if I'm a hospital executive right now, I'm very nervous about any kind of expansion, even if it's the best hospital in the area, because you just don't know what you're going to be reimbursed. Everybody's afraid that the reimbursement rates are going to drop over time because you're going to have this huge federal program that we've created there's not enough revenue for. So back here, I believe the legislature's got to, again, we need to cut rules and regulations. We need to make government smaller. We need to leave more people, more money in the hands of the people that actually earn it, you know, at a state level and a local level. When they see that the opportunity is there, they will grow businesses. They will go out there and make money. Right now, there's not an environment out there, really from a national level, that encourages anybody to do those things. And that's why you see unemployment staying right where it's at. And we don't, in our business, we used to have something called a backlog. A backlog was work that we could look forward to. We knew we had something 6 months, 8 months, a year, 2 years out. backlog is something we're waiting to see again. And it's everybody in our industry, and it's not just me. You talk to other people in other industries, well, how's business? Well, it's good for the next 3 months, but we don't know what it's going to be in 6 months. And so until you see a long-term change, you're not going to see people begin to invest, and they're not going to hire anybody new. And they're very reluctant to hire anybody new right now because they don't know what's going to cost them.
Okay. When I first got here, which was 2004, there was a big discussion about the University of Florida having a research facility somewhere in St. Johns County where their medical school researchers could partner with the hospitals in Duval County. And their argument was, one, Gainesville is not as beautiful a place as St. John's. It'd be easier for them to attract the best and the brightest to come here. It'd be close enough to the campus to teach and close enough to the research hospitals. That went away when the recession went away. But that was the type of partnership that was under Governor Bush, who was a bigger fan of those things than Governor Christ and Governor Scott. But do you see any hope or any possibility for that kind of change? That's the big healthcare initiative that had been talked about when Bill first got into office.
I think that would be great. I mean, those kind of things, you're going to build a campus, we're going to expand that, we're going to hire people to build, and we're going to have people that are coming to teach you. I mean, the University of St. Augustine basically does that now, and they've been a huge success story, which has been very quiet. I mean, not a lot of people in the community know how many kids are coming through that rehab school every year, and what a big impact they are on the community. So, yes, having a teaching facility here would be great. But I'm back to one of your questions. If we go to concurrency, and concurrency says they've got to spend another $1 million on improvements to roads, do we want the facility, or do we want the $1 million to improve the roads?
Someone's going to pay for that $1 million. So it's just a question of who. Let me just ask a 1020 life question. I'm sure you're very familiar with the case of the man in Putnam County who was trying to scare some kids away, fired a gun into the ground. It was a commission of a crime, so he got 20 years. The woman who was having a fight with her husband fired the gun into the wall, and they both were sentenced for 20 years. Now he has gotten a new trial, but the legal community was, or at least some in the legal community were very upset because they thought the punishment far exceeded the crime. There was no intent in either case to kill anybody. They were trying to scare somebody away. And she now is doing 20 years, and he is doing 20 years, but at least he has a chance for a retrial. Do you think it's time to revisit the 1020 life law in light of those two very high-profile cases?
This is where you get into fun when you write rules. Okay, you write a rule and you say, we're going to fix a problem. And so you fix a problem where you have hardcore repeat offenders that we're now dealing with in retained care. Then you have somebody else that falls under that rule inadvertently. You say, well, they didn't have intent to kill anybody. But if they're getting 20 years, they've already had some conviction before that's put them, I mean, it's not their first conviction. There was a reason for that. I'd have to look at all the details in both of those cases. I'm a big believer in you have a rule, but there's always exceptions to the rule. Now, when you begin to legislate every exception to the rule, is it worth having the rule? So that's kind of that tough question. And not knowing the exact details in that case, what they did, I don't know what their background was. But if they went to 20 years, they did something to get the 10 years on the front end. Is the law going to be fair to everybody in every single instance? No. Do we want the law to be fair to most of the people most of the time? Yes. And so I'd have to look at that on an individual. But again, back to there's always things that come up. I mean, I'm constantly out in the building department and talking to them and going, yeah, here's the rule. Here's my project. It doesn't fit the rule. Now what do we do? When they wrote the rule to cover everything. This rule will fix it all.
I'm sure you already know this, but the judge refused to sentence the man to 20 years because he thought it was so harsh and thought it was well beyond the intent of the law. The prosecutor, who's the woman up in Jacksonville, appealed and won, and so another judge was assigned to sentence the guy to 20 years. So it's the case within the judiciary where they would disagree. Okay, I have commented him enough.
I want to ask about the online travel bill, and you're familiar with this. St. Johns County has said in the past that if we don't get this money back from the .com, like Expedia type sites, we lose approximately $100,000 a year, and that was a rough calculation 2 years ago. But yet somehow this bill just keeps coming back and keeps, getting approved. But yet that money is used to provide infrastructure for tourism that doesn't have to come out of our property taxes. What would you do as a legislature from a very high-end tourism economy, convince other people to vote against this kind of thing too?
Well, let me make sure I got your issue, because there's two issues involved with the online sales tax. Okay, one is
Well, this is the online travel.
so this is
This is where Hotels.com, for example, buys a bunch of rooms up, allegedly rooms that would never be sold anyway. They buy them for cut rate, they charge a lower rate, and their contention is that the bed tax should only be paid on the lower rate rather than the book, the actual rate for the room. So therefore, the county has calculated they're losing this money because of the worth of the room.
okay.
It's not really being, charged back.
In my discussions with the travel industry, what they're definitely afraid of, the locals, is that they're going to be made to pay that difference when they didn't get paid for that difference.
Right.
And we're back to, I would support them paying exactly the sales tax on what the room rate that they actually paid was. If the room's supposed to be $100 and Expedia buys it for $80, whatever the tax is on the $80 is what should be paid, not on the $100.
Well, that's what they're paying now.
Well, and here's why, Margot. If the rooms aren't going to be sold, then we don't get people here. And if we turn around and then tell the person that owns the hotel, we're going to charge you more money because you're dealing with this group, then they're going to have less rooms sold. One of the keys to our growth in our area is people coming and actually seeing it and visiting it. The tourism industry is the gatekeepers for our growth in this area. Tourism is a huge part of our economy. You get people that come and stay, and they love St. Augustine. They come back year after year after year. They pay that bed tax. They pay they pay sales tax when they're here on all the items that they buy. They go to restaurants. They employ people. I'd rather have them here visiting us than Expedia says, well, we're not gonna work in St. Johns County anymore. We're not going to offer discounts, and and instead of sending an email out to 300 people that say we've got a special rate to come to St. Augustine for this weekend, that email goes to 300 people that send them to New Smyrna Beach. I would rather have the people here. I'd rather collect what we can collect off of them in this economy.
Okay. All right, now let's deal with online sales tax from out-of-state sellers. What's your position on that?
I believe they should pay it. And most business people agree that they should pay it. You've got some people at the state level that feel like it's going to be difficult to collect and things. Here's my main problem with that. You've got a business that opens in St. Johns County and sells a product for $200. And the state and county are all going to get their cut of the sales tax off that. Also, they employ people in the county. Those people buy and sell things within the county. They pay property taxes within the county. If they're a good, reputable company, they're donating back to the community. Now, we let people, for the sales tax savings, walk into their store, look at what the product is, go back home, order it online, and they save the sales tax if you're an individual. That's wrong. We're putting our businesses at a disadvantage. Now, here's the other problem I have with that. As a business, if I don't report and pay all of my sales taxes, I will get an audit. Go ask the Department of Revenue how many individual audits they do. They do darn few. And so you've got somebody that has basically a blank check to go buy stuff for 6% less, not support the local community. We don't get any of the sales tax revenue. The state's losing out on a tremendous amount of revenue. And we're looking for ways to raise revenue. To me, this is one of the ones we got to go get. If you bought it locally, you'd pay it. And I know the big internet, Amazon and all those are dead set against it. We've got to find a way to collect that tax. It's due. And to me, you shouldn't have one group of people that gets excluded from tax code enforcement because they're buying on the internet, and another group that gets punished if they bought it on the internet. If I bought it on the internet and I had a sales tax audit, I'd be made to pay it. And the only way they catch people individually do it is if they buy large portions, or they buy a whole, they catch them at the border coming in on a semi truck, and they now find out, well, this is where, that's the only way we're catching those folks. And to me, it's a simple, we all either pay the tax or we all don't pay the tax. And if I got to pay the tax, then everybody else should have to pay the tax. And if I don't pay it, and the state of Florida comes in and audits me, I pay penalties and I pay interest on that.
Let me ask, Bill Proctor's said many times that the Pac-Man of the budget is, jumping it up is Medicaid. Until we can control the cost of that, cut the cost of it, there won't be money left over for education. Obviously, education is a big deal in this county. So what would you do, what would you favor that the legislature do to cut the cost or control the cost of Medicaid?
Well, everybody always says fraud. There's fraud out there, and you got to go enforce that. And it's not fraud here. The fraud that's in South Florida is far worse. I mean, I read articles all the time about
Legendary, yes.
Oh, it might be one of the few really good growth industries that we've had in the downturn. It hasn't slowed them down, and they continue to get more. So yes, there's an opportunity there. I think you've got to relook at the program itself. I think you got to look at who's on the program, how it's being funded, how you're getting those resources out to people. And having served on the hospital board and understanding how much free care that Flagler Hospital gives away, I mean that's a drop in the bucket compared to what hospitals in South Florida are probably dealing with, again because of the population and what areas they're in. I think that going in and saying year after year after year, well, we face the same problem and we're just going to look at it the same way every year, we're going to come back to the same result every year. Are we going to take money away from education, or are we going to take money away from healthcare? So now you got to look at how are we going to actually change this. And again, I believe you've got agencies that are invested in Tallahassee on making sure that their budget stays right where it is. We deal with agencies that'll call and say, hey, we're at the end of our budget year, we've got $10,000 to spend, can you come do this improvement for us before the end of the budget year? Because if we don't spend the money, we got to give it back. If we give it back, we lose it next year. That's a crazy way to run a budget. It's absolutely crazy. We would never do that in the private sector, but yet in the public sector, we do that. There's actually an email that went out a couple years ago from one of the contracting groups that we're a part of that said, hey, remember that about the 1st of July, there's only 60 days left in most budgets, in state and federal budgets in this area. Make sure you contact your person at that agency and see if there's any funding available for construction. Now, is that the way we want to run a budget? No. So, I mean, there's issues within that. I think we've got to substantially change the way we fund those issues. And we got to encourage you to talk about pay for performance. Wouldn't it be great if instead of an agency saying, hey, look how much money we saved the state, and the next year they get whacked for saving that money, and say, okay, we reward you now, we want to treat you, what do you need for a budget next year? We understand that if there's savings back, the state's going to get that money back. Wouldn't that be a great way to run a budget system, as opposed to, hey, every budget head out there, we got every controller inside there, hey, we got to spend this money, we got to spend this money, we got to spend this money. There's no incentive to save.
Did you support Governor Scott's position of not participating under the Health Care Act?
Yes. I've talked to Jason Barrett, had a long conversation with him last week. We had a job site meeting and stopped in his office afterwards just to talk about some things. And he's doing a presentation of Rotary on Monday. Hopefully you guys will be there. I've got a little bit of a preview of it. The concern is...
Who is he? Excuse me.
Jay, he's the CFO of Flagler Hospital.
Okay.
And so Jason and Joe Gordy have been researching this issue. It's almost like a drug dealer. Now, Ron, here's some drugs for free. Come back and see me tomorrow. I'll give you some more drugs for free. And all of a sudden you're hooked on the drug. Well, now, Ron, you got to pay, and I want a lot of money for you to pay. They'll pay the federal government's going to fund the first 3 years. Okay. In year 4, they're going to decrease the Medicaid payment by 10%. That could be $1.9 billion to the state of Florida in additional costs. So short term, it is a very good for the state of Florida. Long term, it's an awful plan, because I can tell you what I know of the plan. You're going to continue to see people enroll in it. You're going to continue to see that plan get bigger and bigger and bigger because it's not going to treat the free enterprise system very well. And the government, the only way the federal government will pay for it is to tell the states, we're not only going to pay 85%, we're not going to pay 82%, we're not only going to pay 80%. Hey, we're down to 70%. Now, what would that do to our budget? You're back to that Pac-Man question. You know, God help us trying to fund education if we've got to fund that health care bill. We won't be able to do it, especially in the state of Florida. Look at our demographics. Look at where most of the health care money is spent in that end-of-life care. We got a lot of people that are elderly in the state of Florida that have retired down here. You know, we're going to have a disproportionate share of that pain, in paying for that. So, you know, I'm against it. I think there are a lot of other ways that you could reform healthcare that were not even looked at. I mean, you know, as a small business owner, we budget 25% a year for healthcare increases. You know, we get a 17% increase, we're happy.
Yeah.
You know, this year was thanks to Mark Bailey and the Bailey Group. We had a 4% increase. That's one of the lowest ones we've had in a long time. They worked very, very hard to get that for us. But we literally have had years where our choice is a 35% increase or a 25% increase.
Another question on the budget, of course, is citizens, the insurance regulations in the state of Florida, and that catastrophic disaster could basically undo the state. What are your thoughts on that program and allowing competition in the state, looking at different insurance rules and regs?
It's a model that's broken. Everybody will tell you it's broken, but nobody wants to go. I mean, well, Bill Proctor fought the battle. He got a bill all the way to Governor Christ's desk, and Governor Christ vetoed it.
Right.
Okay, and I think Governor Christ vetoed it for political reasons. He didn't want people to have to pay additional insurance costs in a year that he was going to be running for a higher office. And that's the wrong thing to do. I also think that I don't know, I think Governor Christ decided, well, the federal government will send this much money to New Orleans for Katrina, they'll cover Florida as well. Well, back then we didn't have the debt and deficit that we have today. You know, it'd be very, very difficult for the federal government to do some of the things that they used to do. You've got to get a free market system back in place. You've got to get competition back. You've got to get people off Citizens. There's a great article this morning, I think it was in the Tampa Bay Times, and there was another one in one of the Fort Lauderdale papers about a hearing that was held on this issue. There are actually some people now that are claiming they can get rates lower than Citizens, and Citizens is asking for a cost increase, and they're screaming about it that we don't want Citizens to get the cost increase. Until you get Citizens at an actually sound cost, you're not ever going to stop this problem. So, you know, if they don't allow them to increase, you really want people off the system. You really want the private insurers back in. The bad news is the short term. This is the exact opposite of the healthcare issue, where the short term gain is very pleasant and the long term gain is very painful. This one, the short term pain for all of us will be all your rates are going to go up until you get enough insurers back in the state to say, okay, there's enough of a market, we can spread this risk out. And we're willing to decrease rates. But you'll see increased rates do that. Now, it's not so bad here where we're not in a high hurricane area. I've read articles in South Florida where some people will go from paying $4,000 a year to paying $15,000 a year to insure their house that they've been in for 50 years. That is it's a much tougher issue down there. It's got to be dealt with. It's going to be a very painful process, I think, in the short term, but long-term health of the state is a lot better. I mean, we're all paying for Citizens right now. I mean, when you pay for your insurance bill for your car insurance, when you pay for your house insurance, I'm on Citizens. I'm on the island. I'm assuming that some of you in this room are on Citizens. So,
my last question is on immigration. It ties into a whole bunch of things of support for those folks who are here illegally, jobs. Health care, all that ties together. What are your views on what the state of Florida should do on immigration?
Well, a year ago, I had a little different view than what I have now, and there's one industry that kind of stands out. But a year ago, I told you we need to send them all back. We don't need to fund any of the issues. I feel like you should come to this country legally. And if you legally come to this country, I'm all for that. Nationally, we've let this become a disaster, and it's been a disaster for a long time. We deal with it in E-Verify in our industry. We have become the front lines of immigration. I don't want to be the front lines. I don't control the border. I don't control the National Guard. I don't tell people who gets in and out of the country. But if I can't document that somebody's a legal worker, I get to pay a fine for that. And that's wrong. But opening up services to these, all you're going to do is encourage them to continue to come. I had a employee that worked for me years ago. He married a girl from out of the country. Her mother came and stayed with them. She got sick. She was over 65 years old. We paid all the hospital bills as taxpayers. She never paid a dime in U.S. taxes in her life, but we paid for all of them. That's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong. The farming industry needs some type of guest worker program. If they don't have one, it's going to be a disaster. You're not going to find people that want to go work those farms and do that manual labor. And so you're going to have to come up. That's the one industry that I would tell you that needs a change. I will tell you, our industry in construction, nobody really talks about it, but one of the devastating impacts of the lack of immigration enforcement, in my opinion, was the housing bubble. We didn't have enough domestic workers to build that many houses. Didn't exist. So you get all these illegals that come across, work in the construction trades. Nevada, Arizona, Florida, Georgia. We build house after house after house after house because people are buying them because money's cheap, and then all of a sudden they can't sell them and the whole thing collapses. The collapse starts in 2007, but you don't see unemployment rise for almost a year and a half. Now, if the construction industry had collapsed in the 1950s with all U.S. workers, you would have seen an immediate rise in the unemployment rate. But you didn't see it because a lot of the people that were working in our industry were illegals. And they shifted to the commercial work, and then they shifted to some service work, and now a lot of them have gone back home. Now, that helped create some of this housing bubble that we're dealing with right now. And nobody wants to talk about it, no one wants to say it, but there wasn't enough domestic workers to build those projects. And if you rode through those projects and you saw huge housing developments, not in this area, I mean, I will say this, I don't believe we have that issue in St. Johns County, but there are other parts of the state that did. You rode through them, if you could find somebody that spoke English working in that area, you're doing really good.
So do you send them back? Do you let them stay? Do you pay for the education? What do you do? What do you think?
I think, one, we got to get them back. Paying for the education, and I'm not for paying for the education. Now, if you develop a guest worker program where they're paying taxes and their kids are with them and they're putting money in the system rather than taking money out of the system, then I'm willing to think and look at that. But I want to know that they've got some money in the game and not just coming here and we're providing services. Okay. When times were good, that was not a good idea. Times are bad. Now we're talking about we can't build a school, but we're going to educate people that aren't paying in the tax system. That's not the way to do it.
Cool. More questions? Mike, we appreciate you being here, and you get to close the meeting if you would, sir.
Okay. One of the things that I've learned over the years is you earn a living with one hand and you give back with the other. I've given an awful lot back to this community. It's been a pleasure to do that. I've been honored to work with all the different people at work and in the charity things that I've done over the years. I think that teamwork, that sense of working with other people and being a part of a team and not having an ego where what's best for the community is what's the best thing is one of my advantages. I've got to build teams every day when we do construction projects or when we're doing charitable work. The Home Again effort is another example of that, where we built a team out of nothing and we've gotten some great results. That's the type of legislator that I would be. I will work very, very hard to represent this district, and I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.